back slightly to what we were talking about a minute ago in terms of when you went to Singapore and the differences there, and now you're in Malaysia, obviously. Do you see a big difference between the mentality or the psychological approach that European players have compared to the Asian players or the Malaysian, Singaporean, Indonesian players?
I would say again, yes and no.
Hmm.
The reason why I would say no is because I believe that humans, for the most part, are the same in nature. We all kind of want the same things. We want good things for ourselves, good things for our loved ones. We're motivated kind of by the same things. The same things kind of stress us out. The same things we get anxious about. You know. So for that part, yes, we're mostly the same. Where we're different is in terms of context and culture. So culture, for example, it's how my anxiety show up in Malaysia versus anxiety in the UK.
Hmm.
And again, there's variances there as well because the UK is a very diverse place. But there's a general trend. And what we see for the most part is that countries with colonial history tend to kind of have that mindset of, oh, I believe I can take on anyone.
Hmm.
Where potentially countries which have been colonized might not have that.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that's true in all instances, but it might be the case. There might be a certain reservedness. There might be a certain, I'm sure, the lack of self-belief. There might be something along those lines. And again, everybody's different because for the most part, you could be a champion and be from anywhere.
Hmm.
So again, these are just small trends. They're not the be-all and end-all. And in highly diverse societies like Malaysia or Singapore, you get a
Hmm.
mix of everything.
Yeah.
Because societies here are very mixed in terms of West and East.
Hmm.
So you do really get everything. It really does just depend. I believe that in places like Denmark, they have a really interesting system because there's such a small number of people there.
Hmm.
But the amount of high level athletes is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So clearly they're making the best out of what they've got. Where in some places with larger populations like India or China might need a totally different approach because they've just surely got an endless amount of people there. So they might not need that approach. They could use an
Hmm.
assembly line approach.
Yeah.
So either way, the people within those coaches got to know what they're working with. And again, it's an interesting thing to see on the world sporting stage because it's a celebration of culture. That we'll see with the World Cup in Qatar.
Hmm.
It's a celebration of culture. At the end of the day, sport is a celebration of varying cultures.
Yeah.
And rather than saying this one or that one, it's just understanding differences, accepting them, and then coming together to compete for things which make people very happy.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And one of the narratives that I commonly see in badminton is the whole European versus Asian narrative. Will Europe win? Will Asia win? Etc. And it's just interesting because I think the general consensus is that the European players are a bit louder, a bit more outgoing. They're willing to kind of put themselves out there a bit more. And then the Asian players are slightly more reserved. They're slightly more timid. They don't want to kind of put themselves out there as much as European style players. Is that something that you've seen, or would you push back against that narrative?
I mean, yeah, no, I definitely see that. But again, it's just so much varied because you might have someone really timid from Europe, and you might have someone really outgoing from Asia, and that might be more increasingly common. And then you've got people, from like let's say European players of Asian backgrounds. What do you do with that?
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's more and more common. There is a certain country in the West where all of their players seem to be Asian. 99% of the players seem to be Asian, in terms of descent and background, and they're multilingual.
Hmm.
So there's a whole load of variance there. And again, it's one thing that I don't want to do is put blanket statements on it, but it's just to appreciate that there are subtle differences, but for the most part, everybody's the same.
Hmm.
And everybody's outgoing in the right environment.
Very true. Very
And
true.
you'll be scared in the right environment.
Yeah, that is a good point. To be fair, yeah, I think there are definitely instances when you see some of the Asian players being more outgoing and more comfortable. But I know that in countries like Japan, there's I think it's like the poppy culture or something like that. So when you put your head up, people want to knock you down. You can't stand out too much. You've got to be in the crowd a little bit. Whereas I think in Europe, or maybe even in North America as well, in other sports, not necessarily badminton, you're celebrated for standing out.
And there's some scientific truth to that. There's evidence to back up what you're saying. So I do fully understand what you're saying. Again, those are cultural norms, but what we might see is with globalization as well. You see things like anime in the West, or
Mm,
Japanese cartoons and Korean dramas and K-pop, and it would be the same on the other side. There might be uh, TV shows being shown there as well. So with that kind of mixing of culture and heritage and sharing, we get to a kind of spot where there is a wide variety everywhere. Yeah, definitely what you said is there's definite research and evidence to support those kind of notions.
mhm.
There's a real cultural variances which have been shown, but whether they continue to show is another question.
Yes, as we start merging together slightly more, it'll be interesting to see how that affects people. Um,